all the world's seawater instantly turns into fresh water. You think you'll have unlimited access to water. No, that's the end of the world. If, at this very moment, a high-dimensional observer with godlike civilizational powers were to instantly change the salinity of the world's oceans from 3.5% to 0, you think this is just a massive freshwater windfall that benefits all of humanity? You might think those arid desert fringes would finally welcome unlimited irrigation. Or even, imagine sipping sweet, fresh seawater by the shore. Bro, this is the delusion of human arrogance. You have no idea. That insignificant 3.5% salinity is not some mere seasoning. It is this blue planet's most crucial cosmic stabilizer in its 3.8 billion year history of life evolution. The loss of saltiness is not the liberation of water resources, but the instantaneous collapse of the first and most robust biochemical barrier in Earth's biosphere. Let us zoom in infinitely, from the macrocosm of the coastline to the microcosm of the molecular level. Here, the iron laws of physics show no mercy. We must confront a ruthless scientific concept: osmotic pressure at the fundamental level of life. All carbon-based biological cells are each tiny containers enclosed by semipermeable membranes. This cell membrane is like an extremely precise server firewall. It allows water molecules to pass freely, but strictly restricts the entry and exit of salt ions and other large molecules. Water molecules always follow an intensely self-reinforcing physical law, which is to rush frantically from areas of low solute concentration to areas of high solute concentration until the pressure on both sides reaches an absolute dynamic equilibrium. This is the power of osmotic pressure, a silent yet irresistible molecular level mechanical force. In the original marine environment, the salinity of seawater and the salinity of marine organisms' body fluids maintain an extremely delicate dynamic equilibrium. Fish, crustaceans, and even tiny plankton have equal pressure inside and outside their cells, which allows them to swim freely under the high pressure of the deep sea. But when the ocean instantly turns into pure freshwater, the countdown to this catastrophe hits the enter key. Imagine this scene. Less than 10 seconds have passed. For the trillions of tons of life in the ocean, the external environment they inhabit, so its solute concentration suddenly plummet in a cliff-like drop, plummeting directly to 0. While inside their cells, the original high salinity remained. In that instant, every cell of every marine organism becomes a massive gravitational black hole. The surrounding pure, impurity-free freshwater molecules are like a swarm of nanoscale mechanical insects that have caught the scent of blood, beginning to frantically and unrestrainedly penetrate the cell membranes of all marine life and surge into the cell interiors. This is not gentle nourishment. This is the most brutal invasion on a physical level. As water molecules gather in ever greater numbers, the pressure inside the cells grows explosively at an exponential rate. The cell membranes of living organisms have physical limits. 1 minute later, the first to collapse are the most basic and minute life forms, the single-celled organisms that form the cornerstone of the entire marine food chain: algae and zooplankton. Their cell walls and membranes, in the face of terrifying osmotic pressure, are like rice paper trying to block a high-speed train collision. Bang, bang, bang. In the microscopic world, this is a silent, yet utterly devastating series of molecular-level explosions. Countless cells are literally torn apart at the same moment. Cell membranes rupture. Cell nuclei disintegrate. What was once orderly living matter instantly turns into a chaotic protein slurry. Immediately, the disaster rapidly spreads up the food chain. Let us take a look at those beautiful coral reefs. Those complex ecosystems, known as the ocean's rainforests. The soft tissues of coral polyps, within minutes of coming into contact with fresh water, will swell rapidly, like balloons injected with too much liquid, and then, in an extremely contorted posture, undergo physical disintegration. Their tissues shatter and peel away from their calcium carbonate skeletons, turning into pools of slime devoid of any signs of life. As for those colossal creatures of the deep sea, such as the great white shark and the blue whale, the process of death will be even more filled with the horror of biological alienation. Every blood vessel within these behemoths, every muscle tissue, is subjected to a frenzied infusion of water molecules. Their skin begins to ooze bodily fluids. Their gills, due to the collective rupture of capillaries, spew diluted blood in a frenzy. A sperm whale weighing dozens of tons will, in extreme agony and convulsions, watch helplessly as its body absorbs water like a sponge and swells until, ultimately, its internal organs are physically crushed within its own body. Its flesh, in a very short time, undergoes a molecular-level structural change. It takes only a few hours for 99% of marine life on Earth to be completely wiped out. But this is not the most despairing part. Please imagine the ocean 24 hours after the disaster. The once azure and crystal clear ocean has now become something else entirely. It is a global organic morgue, composed of trillions of tons of dissolved rotting flesh, proteins, lipids, and cellular debris. Mixed together, the color of the seawater will become murky and foul, taking on a bone-chilling grayish-white or dark red hue. Countless swollen and deformed carcasses of deep-sea behemoths will float on the surface. And beneath this lifeless, stagnant water, all traces of life have been erased, leaving only the laws of physics and chemistry to coldly take over the aftermath. This is the price of the system forcibly modifying the underlying code. In the face of pure physical laws, life is so fragile it cannot even leave a final word. Perhaps you are sitting in front of the screen right now and think this is merely a disaster unfolding in the ocean. As land-dwelling creatures, humans can still remain unscathed. Don't be too quick to celebrate. If, at this very moment, a high-dimensional observer were to slightly move their mouse and completely eliminate all the salt in your blood, if, at this very moment, all the salt in your blood were to vanish, do you think your consciousness could survive the next 3 seconds? The electrical signals in your brain's neurons would short-circuit instantly. Your red blood cells would, like popcorn, explode en masse within your blood vessels. The indomitable will to live you believe in is nothing more than a fragile illusion, built upon a few grams of sodium chloride. The true annihilation capable of erasing all hope lies in the deepest recesses of physics, rumbling in a manner that is exceedingly quiet and slow, yet absolutely irreversible. Now, let us shift our gaze away from the microscopic cell membrane and zoom out to a distance of tens of thousands of kilometers above the Earth's surface, to geostationary orbit, and, through the lens of macroscopic thermodynamics, re-examine this lifeless, silent planet that has lost all sense of time. We must confront an extremely harsh truth of physics. Do you think that the 3.5% salinity in the oceans is merely to determine whether the water tastes good? No, that is the ultimate energy source driving the entire planet's climate system. It is the most critical heat transfer medium within the liquid cooling system of Earth. This supercomputer. Now, this medium has been physically reset to zero. In standard geophysical models, there exists a planetary scale system that borders on the miraculous. We call it the thermohaline circulation, or, by its more common name, the ocean conveyor belt. You can imagine Earth as a processor running at insane overclocking speeds. The equatorial region is constantly subjected to the terrifying, nearly vertical heat bombardment of the sun. The seawater here is heated to the extreme, just like a chip core on the verge of overheating, while the North and South poles act as bone-chilling heat sinks. If the excess heat from the equator isn't transported away, the equatorial oceans would boil, and the poles would fall into absolute stillness. Who acts as this transporter? It is that seemingly insignificant salt. Under the laws of physics, when warm equatorial seawater flows along ocean currents to the cold North Atlantic and the edges of Antarctica, a remarkable physical reaction occurs. When seawater freezes, salt crystals precipitate out and are displaced into the surrounding unfrozen seawater. This results in the water remaining in the ocean having an extremely low temperature and an extremely high salinity. Remember this formula in fluid dynamics. Low temperature plus high salinity equals an incredibly high density. This cold, intensely salty seawater becomes heavier than any surrounding water. So, under the relentless pull of Earth's gravity, massive volumes of water measured in millions of cubic kilometers begin to undergo a violent vertical collapse in the deep ocean. They are like invisible, gigantic underwater waterfalls, carrying immense kinetic energy, plunging into the abyss thousands of meters below. This vertical sinking in the deep ocean creates a massive physical vacuum at the ocean's surface. To fill this vacuum, warm surface waters from the equatorial regions are continuously drawn in. This is akin to a massive, planetary-scale pump, using the gravitational potential energy of salinity as voltage to drive the world's oceans in a ceaseless cycle. This warm ocean current, such as the famous Gulf Stream, carries the heat released by the combined operation as they surge northward, carrying warm, moist air toward Western Europe and North America, transforming those lands, which should have been as bitterly cold as Siberia, into the cradle of human civilization with distinct seasons. But now, high-dimensional observers have drained all the salt, and the oceans have become pools of pure freshwater. At this fatal moment, the physical equations governing the thermohaline circulation have been forcibly erased. An absolutely critical variable. As freshwater flows toward the poles, temperatures drop. It does indeed get colder, but having lost the extra density provided by high salinity, this cooled freshwater can no longer achieve the staggering weight required to trigger a deep sea collapse. Not only that, freshwater has its highest density at 4 degrees Celsius. Once it continues to cool or even freezes, its density actually decreases. It will float on the surface, forming a thick, impenetrable ice sheet. This means that planetary scale pump, furiously sucking seawater at the poles, has lost all its power. Its engine, after emitting a muffled sigh of physics, has completely stalled. The ocean conveyor belt has ground to a halt. Do you think this is merely the water ceasing to flow? No, This is the total collapse of Earth's thermodynamic system. Earth has been firmly locked by the laws of physics into an inescapable prison. Without ocean currents to carry away the heat, the equatorial regions will instantly turn into a hellish furnace. The sun's unrestrained radiation will trap all its energy deeply on the surface of the tropical oceans. You will see the equatorial freshwater oceans freed from the constraints of salinity. Under terrifying heat, evaporation rates will skyrocket exponentially. Hundreds of billions of tons of water vapor, like boiling water, will pour frantically into the atmosphere. This extreme heat buildup will give birth to meteorological monsters unprecedented in Earth's history. These are no longer the typhoons or hurricanes we know. Meteorologists call them super cyclones or super intense tropical storms. These monsters will span thousands of kilometers in diameter. The low-pressure system at the storm's center will suck all the surrounding air away. Wind speeds at the edges will easily break the sound barrier. They will act like giant grinding wheels, physically stripping away all the islands near the equator and all traces of civilization along the coastlines, along with the hard bedrock, reducing them to powder. The equator will become a raging cauldron of water, where nothing exists but destruction. And on the other side of the globe, for the mid and high latitude regions that once benefited from ocean currents, such as most of the European continent and North America, the cost of losing this heat transport is an instant plunge into a bottomless abyss of extreme cold. Without the Gulf Stream, that constant supply of heat, the atmospheric circulation over Western Europe will be completely severed. This is not a gradual cooling, but a climate collapse approaching free fall. Within just a few months, temperatures in Western Europe and North America will plummet by dozens of degrees. Winter has arrived, and it will never leave. What blows in from the Atlantic is no longer a warm monsoon, but a polar cold front as sharp as a razor. Once the snow begins to fall, it will never melt. At first, snow blankets the streets. Then ice buries the buildings. In the extreme cold, the surface of the pristine freshwater oceans will freeze rapidly, forming vast ice sheets with extremely high reflectivity. Here, there is a chilling physical feedback loop, known as the albedo effect. The larger the area covered by ice and snow, the more solar radiation they reflect back into space. The less heat the Earth receives, and the lower the temperature drops, leading to even more seawater freezing. It is as if the Earth has implanted a looping code of doom into its own system. Ice sheets are expanding at a visible pace, raging from the poles toward mid-latitude regions. Once thriving cities like London, Paris, and New York, with their towering skyscrapers, will soon be mercilessly swallowed up by glacier, hundreds of meters, or even thousands of meters thick, crushing the steel jungles humanity takes pride in. In the face of this glacial behemoth, driven by the combined forces of planetary gravity and the laws of thermodynamics, they are as fragile as cookie crumbs under a steamroller. Earth, this once gentle blue cradle, has been split in two by the disappearance of 3.5% of its salt content, has been split clean in two by the cold logic of physics. In the middle lies a ceaseless equatorial hell, boiling like a pressure cooker. At either end, all life is still, in frigid ice fields where even time is frozen. Do you think hiding in an underground bunker inland will let you escape the reckoning of this thermal snowstorm? When you watch the numbers on the thermometer plummet below the limits of human survival, when you hear the sound of a several kilometer thick ice sheet above your head, cracking like a bone. Under the pressure of gravity, you might suddenly realize a despairing truth. Every breath of air you take, every wisp of breeze you feel, is not to be taken for granted. They all depend on that silent, salt-driven mechanism flowing deep within the ocean. Now that gear has shattered. Have you always harbored a common misconception that as long as the Amazon rainforest remains, and the Siberian taiga hasn't been burned to the ground, Earth's oxygen will never run out? This is an extremely arrogant and fatal misunderstanding. In this massive ecological server that is Earth, terrestrial plants are, at best, merely local air purifying ONS. The true backbone of 70% of this planet's oxygen production is the core background program of the oceans, those trillions of microscopic phytoplankton invisible to the naked eye. Recall that terrifying moment we simulated in Chapter 1, when the ocean's salinity was instantly reset to zero by a higher dimensional observer. The law of osmotic pressure mercilessly tore apart the cell membranes of all marine life. What does this mean? It means that Earth's largest oxygen-producing factory was completely stripped down to its molecular structure in a mere few minutes. That super background process, which had been running silently for 3 billion years and continuously supplying free oxygen to the atmosphere, suffered a fatal error and collapsed completely. And this was only the beginning of the disaster. Oxygen is an extremely reactive chemical element. Without the continuous photosynthesis of phytoplankton to replenish the oxygen in the atmosphere, it would soon be consumed entirely by various natural oxidation reactions. But Earth's physical systems wouldn't even grant you the time for such a slow depletion. Let us turn our gaze to the global freshwater oceans that have turned into stagnant waters. Trillions of tons of marine biological debris are suspended in this murky liquid, having lost their normal ecological cycles. A type of heterotrophic anaerobic bacteria capable of surviving in extreme anoxic environments began to multiply at an unprecedented rate. They took over this vast morgue of organic matter and launched an epic feast of decay. In this process, we will witness an extremely ruthless law of physical chemistry come into play. That is Henry's law. Henry's law tells us that under constant temperature and pressure, the solubility of a gas in a solution is directly proportional to the partial pressure of that gas in the gas phase. However, if the liquid's temperature rises sharply, or its chemical composition undergoes a drastic change, its ability to dissolve and retain gases will plummet precipitously. Do you recall from the previous chapter that superheated freshwater cauldron in the equatorial region? Extreme heat combined with freshwater's differing solubility for certain gases meant this sea of death is completely unable to contain the massive amounts of waste gas produced when anaerobic bacteria decompose corpses. What are these gases? High concentration carbon dioxide, highly toxic hydrogen sulfide, and methane, the most lethal climate killer. Close your eyes and imagine this vivid apocalyptic scene. On the grey-white, lifeless sea surface, at first, only tiny bubbles rise to the surface. But soon, these bubbles coalesce into massive formations ranging from a few meters to tens of meters, or even thousands of meters in diameter, accompanied by a muffled physical explosion like the roar of a deep-sea beast. Hundreds of billions of tons of mixed methane and carbon dioxide burst through the water's surface in a near-explosive manner, frenetically pouring into Earth's atmosphere. At the same time, due to the complete disruption of the temperature gradient at the ocean floor, the massive quantities of methane hydrates, originally buried deep on the seafloor at the edge of the continental shelf, commonly known as flammable ice, whose physical and thermodynamic conditions for maintaining their crystalline structure are completely shattered. These solid ice blocks undergo an instantaneous phase transition on the seafloor, expanding in volume by more than 160 times, transforming into countless violent columns of gas that tear through the seabed like upside-down tornadoes and shoot straight into the sky. This is the Earth's atmospheric suicide pact. When this astronomical flood of greenhouse gases surges into the atmosphere, the Earth's climate system is forcibly programmed into an irreversible death spiral, a phenomenon scientists call the runaway greenhouse effect. In the short term, methane's greenhouse effect is more than 80 times that of carbon dioxide. These asymmetrical polyatomic gas molecules form layer upon layer of dense and impenetrable nanoscale reflective layers, tightly wrapping the entire Earth. Short-wave radiation from the Sun can easily penetrate this toxic gas layer to reach the Earth's surface. But the long-wave infrared thermal radiation emitted by the Earth's surface is firmly intercepted and absorbed by these gas molecules, and then reflected back to the ground. Heat can enter, but it absolutely cannot escape. Earth's thermal buffer zone is instantly overwhelmed. You will witness a bizarre physical transformation in the color of the sky. The sharp scattering mechanism, originally dominated by nitrogen and oxygen molecules, is completely disrupted. The azure sky is replaced by a thick, yellow-green toxic haze with a sulfuric odor. Sunlight filtering through this toxic haze takes on a dark red halo that causes extreme physical discomfort. And at this moment, as a human being, you will face an extremely brutal double physical ordeal. First comes suffocation, due to the process of oceanic decay, which not only halts oxygen production, but also frantically depletes the atmosphere's remaining oxygen reserves. The oxygen concentration in the atmosphere will plummet from the familiar 21% to 15% in a very short time, then to 10%. The chemoreceptors in your carotid arteries will frantically send alarm signals to your brain. Your heart rate will involuntarily accelerate to over 150 beats per minute. You begin to gasp for air involuntarily, trying to squeeze out a single life-saving oxygen molecule. From this murky air, your vision begins to blur. Your ability to think logically rapidly deteriorates under oxygen deprivation. You are experiencing a countdown to brain death, enforced by the laws of physics. But even more terrifying than the oxygen deprivation is the sudden change in atmospheric pressure, as trillions of tons of additional gas are forcibly crammed into the atmosphere. Atmospheric pressure at the Earth's surface begins to rise sharply. Air, this substance you once thought was as light as a feather, is now, due to the explosive increase in gas density, into an invisible, deadly sledgehammer. Every time you try to expand your chest to breathe, you must fight against an external physical pressure far greater than usual. You feel as though you are not breathing air, but trying to suck a viscous, scorching fluid into your lungs. Extremely high concentrations of carbon dioxide will rapidly convert into carbonic acid in your blood, disrupting your body's acid-base balance and triggering fatal hypercapnia. You will feel a burning sensation that penetrates to the very marrow of your bones, and a numbing sensation. At the same time, the surface temperature under the frenzied heating of a runaway greenhouse effect, is hurtling toward the abyss of 50, 60, or even 70 degrees Celsius. Under such extreme heat and pressure, the water in your body will evaporate at a rate beyond your control. From your pores and respiratory tract, you find yourself in a state of extreme hypoxia, severe acidosis, and rapid dehydration. This once blue, temperate planet is using the purest physical and chemical means to erase every trace of what was once called life. It is moving at an unprecedented speed across vast geological eras toward its neighbor, that hellish planet Venus, where surface temperatures exceed 400 degrees Celsius and sulfuric acid rains fall, and where atmospheric pressure is over 90 times that of Earth's. In the face of this colossal, planetary-scale climate collapse, the civilizational defense systems humanity takes pride in, those air filtration devices, those climate-controlled circulation systems, are powerless against the rewriting of fundamental physical laws, unable to provide even a few days' respite. We are like prisoners locked inside a microwave oven that is being slowly heated, while the oxygen is drained and toxic gases are frantically pumped in, apart from watching in despair as the sky beyond the glass door turns a sickly yellow. There is no room for resistance. Do you understand now? Every breath of air we take has never been a free gift from nature, but rather a precarious balance of the Earth's ecosystem, walking a tightrope when the cornerstone of salinity is stripped away. The collapse of the atmosphere is merely the second blade of the law of physics to fall. Yet it remains a fitting example. When the Earth's atmosphere and oceans have completely diverged, those few surviving organisms that were once hidden beneath the water will, in this hellscape of intertwined toxic gases and wastewater, initiate a brutal reign of thoroughly twisted evolution. In human common sense, evolution is often depicted as an ever-ascending staircase, from single cell to multicellular, from ocean to land, from crawling to bipedalism, as if life always evolves toward a higher, smarter, and more perfect direction. We subconsciously believe that those who survive are always the strongest, the most agile, or the species with the most developed cerebral cortex. Yet when the system administrator, without warning, directly sets the global variable of ocean salinity to zero without warning, the so-called logic of the strong collapsed instantly. Faced with this extreme physical filtering mechanism, known as the evolutionary bottleneck, the apex predators that once ruled the oceans, whether the exceptionally intelligent orcas or the great white sharks with their astonishing bite force, their intricate and complex bodily structures, under the crushing blow of osmotic pressure, could not even secure the right to survive for 5 minutes. Their strength and intelligence, once their pride, turned into meaningless redundant code, and were forcibly erased from Earth's memory by the laws of physics. So, who survived this unprecedented version purge? The answer will leave you feeling extreme physical discomfort and absurdity. Those who survived were not some perfect, ultimate life forms, but rather, within Earth's biosphere, those who once dwelled on the fringes, the outliers carrying special system patches. They are the wanderers at the boundary between freshwater and saltwater, the rare exceptions to what we biologically call extensional organisms. In this chaotic, murky freshwater reeking of death, let us focus our macro lens on a survivor undergoing drastic biological transformation in the old, normal world of yore. The bull shark was an exceptionally unique cartilaginous fish, possessing the physical ability to move freely between freshwater rivers and saltwater oceans. When disaster struck, and all marine life was undergoing a collective molecular level rupture due to cell swelling with water, the bull shark's internal biological feedback mechanism was instantly activated. We need to adopt a mechanical engineering perspective to understand the physiological frenzy the bull shark is currently experiencing. Within its body exists an extremely robust reverse osmotic pressure regulation system. Its kidneys, the moment they detect the external environment's salinity dropping to zero, immediately switch to an extreme overload drainage mode. Imagine a water pump running at 1000% overclock, to prevent those deadly freshwater molecules from bursting its cells. The bull shark's kidneys must work day and night with frenzied intensity to filter out the excess water that has seeped into its body and expel it. Its current urine output is hundreds of times greater than before the disaster. Meanwhile, the rectal canal, which was originally used to expel excess salts, is now forced to shut down completely. It must cling desperately to the insignificant inorganic salt ions remaining within its body. This is the price of survival. This extreme biological defense mechanism is cruelly draining the bull shark's very life force. To keep this overclock pump running, it must expend astronomical amounts of energy. Its basal metabolic rate has been forcibly driven to a horrifying threshold that would instantly kill any ordinary creature. Hunger, a hunger that transcends biological instinct, a purely physical hunger akin to a black hole, has completely taken over the bull shark's nervous system. It is no longer that elegant yet deadly hunter lurking at the edge of the coral reef. Lurking at the edge of the coral reef, in the face of extreme energy depletion and a highly toxic environment, the surviving bull shark is undergoing a visibly evident morphological transformation. In this murky broth, filled with trillions of tons of rotting biological debris, where visibility is nearly zero, vision has completely lost its meaning. His eyeballs, due to prolonged abnormal water pressure and immersion in toxins, have atrophied and are now covered by a layer of grayish-white membrane. It has become a devouring machine that relies purely on its sense of smell and electric receptors to wander blindly in the darkness. It swallows in huge gulps the dissolving blubber of blue whales, the shattered entrails of dolphins, and even the sludge teeming with highly toxic anaerobic bacteria, swallowed whole. In this new world where ecological niches have been completely reshuffled, there is no elegant hunting, only an endless, frenzied stuffing, carried out to maintain osmotic balance within the body. Meanwhile, let us take a look at another survivor hailed as a miracle: the salmon. In the old world, the salmon's life cycle was a magnificent epic. They were born in freshwater, grew up in the ocean, and finally swim upstream to their birthplace to reproduce and die. Their bodies were originally designed to undergo a one-way reset from freshwater to saltwater, and then from saltwater back to freshwater. But now, the ocean has permanently turned into freshwater. The salmon are forever locked into a freshwater cycle. Those young fish, who were originally prepared to absorb salt and store energy in the ocean, suddenly find themselves with nowhere to go. They can only wander aimlessly in this vast, boundless endless freshwater wasteland. As time passes, the salmon, whose reverse regulatory system was originally designed for short-term freshwater migrations, begins to collapse due to prolonged mechanical wear. You will witness a deeply distorted scene of biological apocalypse. Flocks of salmon, still alive and swimming, their bodies begin to undergo localized physical disintegration due to the gradual loss of control over osmotic regulation. Water irreversibly infiltrates their muscle tissue. Their skin begins to turn white and rot. Large chunks of muscle, while swimming, fall away from their bones. They become the most pitiful living dead fish in the world, even as their flesh undergoes molecular-level disintegration. That faint thread of the survival instinct, corrupted and buried deep within their genes, still drives these shattered husks, in this hellish murk, to mechanically flap their tails until the very last set of neurons ceases to fire due to the complete depletion of electrolytes. This is the ultimate outcome of the great ecological reshuffle. The ruthless scissors of evolutionary theory have mercilessly severed from the tree of life those most lush, most beautiful, and most complex branches. The once vibrant, three-dimensional ecological network has been brutally reduced in dimension, struck down into an extremely short-lived and primitive unidirectional food chain. Earth's biodiversity has not only failed to evolve forward, but has instead plummeted at an unprecedented speed, back to the state of extreme barrenness. The state of extreme barrenness that preceded the great explosion of life is now even worse, because in the primordial oceans of the Cambrian, life was filled with infinite possibilities and upward momentum, while now, in this Dead Sea, what wonders are nothing but remnants of genes, forcibly twisted by extreme physical parameters and degenerated into monstrous aberrations. To adapt to this absurd world, all that excellent genetic code accumulated over hundreds of millions of years. Excellent code regarding how to construct complex retinas, how to develop advanced cerebral cortexes, and how to evolve social cooperative behavior, has all been treated as invalid data and ruthlessly formatted by this freshwater ocean. The life system on this planet is like a next-gen AAA title that originally possessed stunning visuals and complex artificial intelligence, but due to missing underlying engine files, has been forced to downgrade into a low-quality video game, devouring one another on a black screen. A shoddy video game. No beauty, no complexity, only the most basic input and output, only the most primitive swallowing and excretion. This is the brutal reign of the freshwater killers. They are the only winners on this planet, and the most pitiful prisoners. They have won the entire world's living space, yet lost everything regarding the dignity of life and the future of evolutionary possibilities. In this murky ocean, locked by the laws of thermodynamics, shrouded in toxic fumes, and filled with endless rotting flesh, they will swim blindly and feed frantically until Earth's environment has completely deteriorated. Until finally, the last shred of energy sustaining their deformed metabolism is exhausted. Now, let us return to the high-dimensional observer who pressed the Enter key, the very second when global ocean salinity was instantly reset to zero. You might think, the salt is gone, but the water is still there. The volume of the liquid hasn't undergone a catastrophic change. What impact could this possibly have on geology? This is the blind spot of human intuition. It is a manifestation of a lack of reverence for the law of conservation of mass in physics. that 3.5% of salt in the ocean is not merely a few grains of dust floating in water. If we were to extract all these inorganic salts dissolved in seawater and spread them out across the Earth's surface, they would form a layer over 150 meters thick, a solid rock layer, covering all the land on Earth. Its total mass reaches a mind-boggling 4.9 quadrillion tons. For 0.9 quadrillion tons. Please let this astronomical figure sink in. At the very moment this catastrophe struck, this 4.9 quadrillion tons of mass vanished into thin air. It is akin to a supercargo ship that has been sailing fully loaded for 4 billion years, whose system suddenly, without warning, instantly removes 3.5% of the ballast from its cargo holds. According to the theory of crustal equilibrium, when the immense physical downward pressure suddenly and sharply decreases, the Earth's slow-moving, viscous layer, which had been suppressed beneath the crust, like a super spring compressed to its limit, will immediately unleash an explosive physical rebound. This phenomenon is known in geology as isostatic rebound. But my friend, this is absolutely not the gentle bounce you experience when jumping off a trampoline. This is a planetary scale collision of physical forces, a volumetric explosion, when the Earth's gravitational calculation system detects that the oceanic crust has suddenly become 4.9 quadrillion tons lighter. The compensation mechanism is instantly activated. The magma ocean buried dozens of kilometers underground, with an unmatched hydraulic thrust, begins to surge upward, overwhelming the entire Earth's oceanic crust. At first, this backlash begins as an extremely low-frequency sound wave, inaudible to the human ear. If you are still alive, you will feel a sense of nausea and dizziness rising from the depths of your soul. This is because the Earth is emitting extremely low-frequency physical tremors that pierce directly through your bones, causing your vestibular system to suffer severe physical overload. Immediately afterward, the true catastrophe erupts. The oceanic crust is not a piece of soft rubber. It is rock, extremely hard yet extremely brittle. When tens of millions of square kilometers of crust are simultaneously subjected to the mantle's frenzied upward thrust, its critical point of physical deformation is instantly breached. Imagine a massive sheet of tempered glass being forcefully bent upward by two hands. Crack! On the ocean floor spanning the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans. Those mid-ocean ridges stretching tens of thousands of kilometers were originally the weakest seams in the crust. At this moment, these seams were sliced open by an invisible sword of God, accompanied by a deafening roar powerful enough to shatter every remnant in the deep sea. One after another, geological rifts, thousands of kilometers long and bottomless, formed instantly on the ocean floor. But this was merely the first step in the restructuring of the lithosphere. What truly plunged land-based civilizations into irreparable ruin was the global plate fracture caused by stress transfer. Let us turn our gaze to the Ring of Fire. This is the deadly boundary where the Pacific Plate, the Eurasian Plate, and the American Plate undergo violent subduction and collision. In the Old World, the Pacific Plate, bearing the immense weight of the ocean, slowly and deeply plunged beneath the continental plates. Between these two colossal masses of rock, a terrifying frictional force accumulated enough to shatter the moon. When the seawater in the Pacific instantly lost that massive ballast of rock dust, the Pacific Plate began to rise violently. This rise completely shattered the fragile interlocking force that had sustained the subduction zone for tens of millions of years. It was like a rusty gear that had been jammed tight, suddenly injected with extremely violent power. It jumped out of sync from the Japan Trench to the Mariana Trench, from the Aleutian Islands to the Andes Mountains. The subduction zone, stretching tens of thousands of kilometers, suffered catastrophic physical fractures all at once. This was unlike any earthquake ever recorded in human history. It was not a magnitude 8, nor a magnitude 9. It was a true tearing of the Earth's crust that exceeded the measurement limits of existing seismographs. The Earth was no longer merely shaking, but undergoing a spatial displacement. If you stood on the coastline, you would not see buildings swaying and collapsing. You would see the entire continental plate on which the city stands, within a mere few seconds, being subjected to an irresistible horizontal shear force, and forcibly shifted toward the ocean by tens of meters, or even dozens of meters. The soil and rock on the surface churned and surged like liquid waves. The load-bearing steel reinforcements of skyscrapers, under the terrifying lateral acceleration, instantly exceeded their yield strength. Snapping like noodles, concrete turns into a cloud of powder. The city is not destroyed by the quake, but physically erased. Yet the kinetic energy released by the crustal rupture is still insufficient to quell this geological scale frenzy. Accompanying it is a deeper thermodynamic nightmare. In geology, there is an extremely ruthless mechanism called decompression capacity. When the crustal pressure above the asthenosphere suddenly drops, those mantle rocks, which were originally at extremely high temperatures, but remained solid due to high pressure, their melting points would instantly drop dramatically. What does this mean? It means, beneath the oceanic crust, millions of cubic kilometers of hard rock, within 1/1000 of a second of the pressure release, collectively underwent a physical phase transition, instantly transforming from a solid state into an extremely violent liquid magma with temperatures as high as 1,200 degrees Celsius, flowing along the newly torn mid-ocean ridges and subduction zones and fissures. This newly formed super magma ocean, like demons that have found an outlet, gushed upward at near supersonic speeds and collided directly with that extremely murky freshwater ocean, which had already turned into a morgue for organic matter. The cold, or rather, boiling freshwater, came into direct physical contact with 1,200-degree mantle magma. This was no longer a volcanic eruption. It was a steam explosion covering the entire global seafloor. The moment water molecules touched the magma, they underwent violent volumetric expansion, expanding by a factor of thousands. Hundreds of thousands of undersea volcanoes erupted simultaneously, propelling hundreds of billions of tons of scalding steam, magma debris, and highly toxic sulfides through thousands of meters of water like a shotgun blast, directly into an already overburdened, toxic atmosphere. The oceans have come to a full boil. This is no longer a metaphor, but a literal, physical boiling. Under the frenzied heat of the magma, the waters of the entire ocean begin to churn. The largest body of water on the planet's surface turned into a cauldron of molten lava. Rotten flesh and toxic gases, a chaotic, thick stew. Meanwhile, on land, supervolcanoes also received activation signals transmitted by the tremors of the crust. Lake Toba in Yellowstone. These magma monsters slumbering beneath the surface, the once solid domes of their magma chambers, under the repeated tearing of global earthquakes exceeding magnitude 10, cracked open. Thousands of cubic kilometers of volcanic ash, pumice, and volcanic gases broke free from the Earth's crust, transforming into dark red columns of fire shooting tens of thousands of meters into the sky, across the entire surface of the Earth. From the deep seas to the land, liquid fire and deadly toxic gases were erupting everywhere. At this very moment, a minor parameter adjustment by a high-dimensional observer finally completed the thorough physical reshaping of Earth's surface. Finally, I want to say, in this vast universe, you are not merely a superfluous instruction, but rather the gentlest reunion among the stars' billion-year drift. You thought life was just a mundane repetition, but the reality is, you are the one and only miracle woven from countless coincidences. The splendor you behold is a grand hymn, meticulously composed by the universe to celebrate your arrival. Now, you sit quietly by the sea, listening to the breath of the waves. The afterglow of the stars flows through your veins. With every heartbeat, the universe whispers to you, "Thank you for coming into this world."